My husband divorced me by text. I'm leaving you for my 21-year-old girlfriend and moving to Florida. I've already drained our joint account, haha. I calmly replied. Good luck. By the time he found out what I'd done, it was already too late. I'll tell you everything. First, let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's special shout out goes to Marie Jones, from Memphis, Tennessee. Thank you for being part of our family. Now, let me tell you everything. The notification pinged on my phone while I was teaching my cooking class at the community center. 12 eager students watched as I demonstrated how to fold dumplings, but my eyes were locked on the screen. I'm done with this marriage, Linda. Moving to Florida with Jessica. She's 21 and amazing. Already took everything from our account. My student Martha noticed my pause. Everything okay, Mrs. Rodriguez? I smiled, tucking my phone away. Perfectly fine. Now, who wants to learn the secret to crispy edges? My voice stayed steady, but my mind was already 3 steps ahead. After 15 years of marriage, David thought he could just vanish with our money and a girl barely older than our nephew. I finished the class like nothing had happened. Helped clean up, said goodbye to everyone, locked the center's kitchen. Only then did I pull out my phone and type back. Good luck. 2 simple words. No drama, no begging, no tears. You see, I'm Linda, 42 years old, and I've been watching my husband's midlife crisis unfold like a slow-motion car crash. The expensive cologne that appeared in our bathroom. The sudden interest in tight jeans and leather jackets. The way he started talking about living life to the fullest, while complaining our marriage felt too routine. 3 months ago, I'd found hotel receipts in his jacket pocket. Same day, I opened my own secret account at First National Bank. When David suggested we simplify our finances by putting everything together, I agreed with a big smile. What he didn't know. I'd been moving my teaching income, my catering money, and my grandmother's inheritance to my private account for weeks. Walking to my car, my phone buzzed again. Don't try to stop me. Jessica and I are meant to be together. I've been planning this for months. Planning for months. I screenshot the message and added it to my special folder labeled Evidence. See, the joint account David had drained. It contained exactly what I'd been depositing each week. Just enough to keep him from getting suspicious. About $2,000. The real money, the money from my successful catering business, my cooking classes, the food truck I'd been running on weekends. All safe in my name only. I called my sister Maria first. He actually did it, I said, starting my car. Sent the breakup text and everything. Maria had been warning me about David's wandering eye since our last family barbecue. What's your next move? She asked. I smiled, pulling out of the parking lot. Phase 2. My attorney Jennifer was expecting my call. We'd met 6 weeks ago when I'd found Jessica's love letters hidden in David's toolbox. Time to file? She asked immediately. He just made it easy for us, I replied, forwarding his texts. Can you believe he admitted to planning this for months and stealing our money? Jennifer laughed. Linda, your husband just handed us the perfect case. Text evidence of premeditation, confession to taking marital funds, and abandonment. Plus, your business records show clear separation of assets. While David probably pictured me crying into a tissue box, I was actually sitting in my favorite coffee shop, reviewing the paperwork I'd prepared weeks ago. The house title, in my name only, inherited from my parents. The food truck registration, my name. The catering business license, mine. The cooking class contracts, all mine. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I know you're angry, but this is for the best. You're not getting any younger, and Jessica makes me feel alive again. Each text was another nail in his coffin. I forwarded every message to Jennifer and kept my responses short and sweet. Understood. Take care. Be well. That evening I sat in our house. Well, my house now, and made a list. David thought he was so clever, but he'd never paid attention to the details. Like how I'd kept meticulous records of every business transaction. How I'd never mixed personal and business money. How I'd rebuilt our marriage home with insurance money after the fire 3 years ago. All in my name. The doorbell rang around 8. David's brother Mike stood there looking embarrassed. "Linda, I'm so sorry." David called the family, said you two grew apart. "But the way he's talking about this Jessica girl." Mike shook his head. "Something doesn't feel right about this." "He's a grown man making his choices," I replied, inviting Mike in for coffee. We'd always gotten along well. "Did he mention draining our bank account too?" Mike's face went white. "He said what?" "Linda, that's not okay." I showed him David's texts. Mike read them twice, his expression growing more disgusted with each word. 15 years of marriage, and he ends it with "ll." Mike shook his head. "My brother's lost his mind. And Jessica. I met her at his office party. She kept asking if David was really successful, how much money he made." After Mike left, I called the credit card company. "Hi, this is Linda Rodriguez. I need to report unauthorized charges and cancel my husband as an authorized user." The representative found the charges immediately. 2 plane tickets to Miami, a luxury hotel booking, expensive dinners. All charged after David had already told me he was leaving. "Based on these text messages you've sent us, Mrs. Rodriguez, we'll reverse all charges and cancel his access immediately." I could practically hear the satisfaction in her voice. David and Jessica would arrive at the airport tomorrow to find their romantic getaway cancelled. My food truck partner Carlos called that night. "Linda, there's weird rumors going around the restaurant association. Something about David claiming part ownership of our business." I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my tea. "Carlos, David has never worked one day in the food industry. Never even helped me load the truck." "That's what I figured," Carlos replied. "But he's been telling people he was your silent partner, that he provided the startup money." Another lie for Jennifer's growing file. I'd started the food truck with my own savings and a loan in my name only. David had actually complained about the long hours and called it my hobby phase. Morning brought a flood of increasingly angry messages from David. "What did you do? Our tickets are cancelled. The hotel won't honor our reservation." Then, "Answer me, Linda. I know you're behind this." I made myself a calm breakfast, fed my cat Whiskers, and prepared for another day of teaching. My Tuesday morning class was my favorite. Senior citizens learning to make traditional Mexican dishes. Mrs. Patterson, 75 years old and fierce as a lion, noticed my mood immediately. "You look different today, dear. Lighter somehow." I smiled, adding cumin to the rice. Just making some positive changes in my life. Around noon, David's sister Rachel called. "Linda, what's this about divorce papers? David is ranting about you being vindictive and destroying his happiness." I put her on speaker while I prepared ingredients for my afternoon catering job. "Rachel, did he mention the text where he bragged about stealing our money?" Long silence. Then, He took money from your joint account." I read her David's messages word for word. The haha after telling me he'd drained our account. The comments about my age. The casual cruelty of ending 15 years through text messages. "Oh my God, Linda. Had no idea. He told us you'd been cold and distant, that you'd grown apart naturally." Rachel's voice cracked. "But these messages. This isn't the brother I thought I knew." By afternoon, David's mother called. Margaret had always been tough but fair. "Linda, dear, Rachel told me everything. Those text messages. I'm ashamed of my son. Stealing money, abandoning his wife for some child, ending a marriage through his phone." He paused. "What can I do to help?" "Just don't enable him, Margaret. He needs to face consequences for once." David had always been the golden child, the one who got bailed out of every mistake. His parents had paid for his car repairs, his credit card debts, even his failed business ventures. That evening brought my favorite call. Jennifer, my attorney, with an update. Linda, the emergency hearing is set for Friday. Given David's text confessions and the credit card fraud, we're looking at a slam dunk. Plus, Jessica's been posting their whole disaster on social media. She's complaining about being stuck in a cheap motel. I actually felt sorry for Jessica. At 21, she probably thought she was getting a successful older man. Instead, she got David, a 45-year-old with more debt than sense, living off credit cards and his wife's hard work. My phone buzzed with another text from David. You think you're so smart, but I know about your little business. Half of that food truck is mine. I forwarded it to Jennifer immediately. Poor David. He'd never paid attention to my paperwork. Never realized I'd built everything without his help or money. The food truck, the catering business, the cooking classes. I'd started them all while he complained about my endless working and asked when I'd have time to focus on him again. Now he wanted to claim ownership. The business licenses, the insurance policies, the equipment receipts. All in my name. Thursday morning, my cooking class student surprised me with a card. We heard about your troubles, Mrs. Patterson said kindly. But we want you to know, you're the strongest woman we know. I teared up reading their messages of support. These people had become my family over the years. The funny thing about David's great escape. He'd never bothered to learn about Florida residency requirements, divorce laws, or Jessica's real financial situation. According to Mike, Jessica worked part-time at a smoothie shop and lived in a studio apartment with 2 roommates. Not exactly the glamorous lifestyle David had imagined. My sister Maria stopped by that evening with wine and Chinese takeout. So tomorrow's the big day. I nodded, reviewing my documentation one last time. 15 years of marriage reduced to a stack of papers, text messages, and financial records. You know what's crazy? Told Maria. If David had just talked to me, we could have worked things out. Marriage counseling may be a trial separation. But he chose the most hurtful way possible. Maria raised her glass. His loss. You're about to be free. The courthouse Friday morning felt like a stage for David's final performance. He showed up in his new young guy outfit, ripped jeans, graphic t-shirt, sneakers that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. Jessica waited outside, looking uncomfortable in clothes too fancy for a courthouse visit. My attorney Jennifer was all business. Remember, Linda, stay calm and let the evidence speak. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, reviewed our materials with raised eyebrows. David's lawyer, clearly hired in panic, kept shuffling papers nervously. Your Honor, Jennifer began. Mr. Rodriguez admitted via text message to deliberately draining marital assets and using shared credit cards to fund a vacation with his girlfriend. We have documented evidence of his deception and financial misconduct. David's lawyer tried a desperate defense. My client simply wanted to start fresh. The marriage had been failing for months. The judge looked unimpressed. By committing what appears to be theft and credit card fraud, I watched David's face as reality hit him. He'd expected this to be simple. Divorce the boring wife, take half her stuff, start fresh in Florida. Instead, he was facing a judge who clearly had no patience for men who abandoned their families via text message. Mr. Rodriguez, the judge addressed David directly. You sent messages bragging about draining your joint account and stealing money for a vacation. Do you deny this? David shifted uncomfortably. I was just trying to make a clean break. The judge's expression grew colder. By committing crimes. The hearing lasted 2 hours, but the outcome was clear from the beginning. David's text messages had created a perfect paper trail of his intentions. His admission of months of planning destroyed any claim of spontaneous decision-making. The credit card charges proved financial fraud. The court finds clear evidence of financial misconduct, the judge announced. All marital assets are frozen pending final dissolution. Mr. Rodriguez must return stolen funds within 48 hours. David's face went white. But that money's gone. We spent it on Then I suggest you find a way to replace it. The judge cut him off. And Mr. Rodriguez. The court takes a very dim view of abandoning your spouse via text message while committing financial fraud. Outside the courthouse, I heard Jessica arguing with David about their failed Florida plans. Their voices carried across the parking lot, her confused, him angry and defensive. I felt a moment of clarity walking to my car. This wasn't about winning or losing. It was about protecting myself from someone who'd shown his true character. The next few weeks brought a parade of David's desperate attempts to rewrite history. He claimed he'd helped start my food truck business. The loan paperwork proved otherwise. He said he'd been my business partner in the catering company. The state records showed my sole ownership. He even tried saying the cooking classes were his idea. My teaching certification and rental agreements told a different story. Jennifer called with updates that ranged from amusing to pathetic. He's now claiming you were emotionally abusive and that leaving was his only option. His lawyer asked me to consider that defense. We both laughed. What did you tell him? Yes. I offered to share your student's character references and the text messages where he admits to planning this for months. David's attempts to paint himself as the victim fell flat when faced with his own written confessions of deception. The divorce proceedings revealed just how little David had contributed to our actual life together. While I'd been building businesses, he'd been accumulating credit card debt on expensive gadgets and clothes. While I'd been planning for our future, he'd been planning his escape. Maria visited regularly during this time, helping me process the end of my marriage. Are you sad it's over? She asked one evening. I considered the question seriously. I'm sad about the time I wasted. Sad about the person I thought he was. But relieved about who I really am. My cooking classes became a form of therapy. Students shared their own stories of betrayal and recovery. Mrs. Patterson, whose husband had left her after 40 years, became my unofficial mentor. The first year is the hardest, she told me while we prepared tamales. But then you realize you're not half of something anymore. You're whole by yourself. David's family gradually shifted their support to me. His brother Mike brought divorce papers David had tried to hide. His sister Rachel shared concerned messages about his erratic behavior. Even his parents, Margaret and Robert, called to check on my well-being. We raised him better than this, Margaret said during one particularly long conversation. But somewhere along the way, David started believing he deserved more than what he had. More exciting wife, more money, more attention. He forgot about gratitude. Through mutual friends, I heard about David and Jessica's relationship crashing spectacularly. Living in a studio apartment with 2 roommates wasn't the romantic adventure either had imagined. Jessica's social media went from posting couple photos to cryptic quotes about learning from mistakes and toxic relationships. My food truck partner Carlos brought me the funniest update. Linda, David actually came by the truck yesterday. Asked if we needed an investor now that you were single. Carlos couldn't stop laughing. I told him the business was thriving and we were actually opening a second location. His face was priceless. That night I sat in my kitchen, the heart of my home and my business, planning menus for next month's cooking classes. David had always complained about the smell of spices, the mess of testing new recipes. Now I could cook whatever I wanted whenever I wanted. The final divorce hearing painted a clear picture of our 15-year marriage. David kept my grandmother's engagement ring, which legally belonged to me. I kept the house I'd inherited, the businesses I'd built, and the savings I'd protected. His lawyer made one last desperate attempt to claim spousal support. Your Honor, my client gave up career opportunities to support his wife's business ventures. Jennifer stood immediately. Mrs. Rodriguez's business records show she worked 60-hour weeks while maintaining the household and supporting Mr. Rodriguez through multiple job changes and failed business attempts. The judge had clearly run out of patience with David's excuses. Mr. Rodriguez, the evidence shows you contributed very little to the marital partnership while your wife built multiple successful businesses. Your admitted plan to drain joint accounts demonstrates a fundamental lack of respect for your spouse. David's final settlement reflected his choices. He got his personal belongings, his car, with 3 years of payments remaining, and his accumulated debt. I kept everything I'd worked to build. The house, the businesses, the future I'd planned. This is unfair. David protested as we left the courthouse. 15 years of marriage should count for something. His mother, who'd come to support me rather than him, shook her head sadly. Those 15 years do count, David. They show exactly who you really are. Jessica was notably absent from this final hearing. According to office gossip, she'd started dating someone her own age and returned to college. David was left facing the consequences of his choices alone. 45 years old, living in a cheap apartment, working a job that barely covered his expenses. 6 months after David's text message ended our marriage, I hosted the grand opening of my second food truck location. The event drew hundreds of people. Former students, local business owners, friends who'd supported me through the divorce. Local news covered the story, but not as abandoned wife recovers, as successful entrepreneur expands empire. My sister Maria worked the crowd, proudly telling everyone about my journey from heartbreak to success. She took her husband's worst moment and turned it into her greatest opportunity, she told a reporter. I smiled, watching my team serve food to happy customers. David drove by during the celebration. I saw his old car slow down as he stared at the crowd, the news cameras, the banner celebrating my expansion. For a moment, our eyes met through the window. I felt nothing but peace. His betrayal had freed me to become who I was meant to be. The business grew beyond my wildest dreams. I hired 6 employees, opened a small restaurant, and started offering franchise opportunities to other aspiring food entrepreneurs. What David had dismissed as my little cooking hobby became a thriving business empire worth more than he'd ever earn. Jessica reached out once, almost a year after everything ended. She'd heard about my success and wanted to apologize. I thought I was saving him from an unhappy marriage, she admitted over coffee. I believed everything he told me about you being cold and controlling. He was looking for someone to blame for his own unhappiness, I explained. It wasn't really about you or me. It was about him not knowing how to be grateful for what he had. Jessica nodded, looking much older than her 22 years. I learned that lesson the hard way. 2 years after the divorce, I was invited to speak at a women's entrepreneurship conference. My topic wasn't about marriage or divorce. It was about building a business while protecting your assets. The audience was full of ambitious women who understood the importance of financial independence. During the Q&A, a young woman asked about keeping business and personal finances separate. My boyfriend says that shows I don't trust him, she said. I smiled, remembering David's similar complaints. Protection isn't about trust, I replied. It's about being smart. Trust your instincts, always. My cooking classes had evolved into a local institution. Students came not just to learn recipes, but to hear stories of resilience and recovery. Mrs. Patterson, now 77, had become my co-instructor. Linda doesn't just teach cooking, she'd tell new students. She teaches people how to nourish themselves. David's attempts to rebuild his life were less successful. According to his brother Mike, he'd tried several dating apps but struggled to find women interested in a middle-aged man with limited resources and a reputation for abandoning his wife. His social media posts about being young at heart felt increasingly desperate. He'd attempted to start his own business, a food delivery service that competed directly with my successful restaurants. It failed within 6 months due to poor planning and insufficient funding. Mike told me David had asked his parents for money, but they'd learned their lesson about enabling his poor decisions. The final update came from an unexpected source. Margaret, David's mother, had become a regular customer at my restaurant. He asked me to talk to you, she said one day over lunch. Wants to know if you'd consider a reconciliation. I set down my fork and looked at this woman who'd raised the man who'd tried to destroy me. Margaret, what do you think I should do? She was quiet for a long moment, then shook her head. Linda, my son showed you exactly who he is when things got difficult. People don't change unless they really want to. And David still thinks he's the victim in this story. That conversation confirmed what I already knew. David's text message hadn't just ended our marriage. It had revealed the truth about his character. Someone who could plan betrayal for months, steal shared money, and abandon their spouse via text wasn't someone who'd learned from their mistakes. 3 years after that cruel message, I received an invitation to my nephew's wedding. David's nephew too, from his brother Mike's family. I almost didn't go, but Mike personally asked me to be there. You're still family to us, he said. David's actions don't change that. At the wedding reception, I sat with Mike's family, laughing and celebrating new love. Across the room, David sat alone at a corner table. He'd gained weight, lost more hair, and looked older than his years. When our eyes met, he raised his glass slightly, an acknowledgement of some kind. Later, as I was leaving, he approached me in the parking lot. Linda, he said quietly. I wanted to tell you. He struggled for words, and I waited patiently. Finally, I was wrong. About everything. I threw away the best thing in my life. I looked at this man who'd shared 15 years of my life, who'd promised to love and honor me, who'd ended our marriage with haha in a text message. David, I said gently, I hope you find happiness. Really do. Just not with me. Driving home that night, I thought about the journey from that devastating text message to this moment of closure. David's betrayal had been the catalyst for discovering my own strength. His attempt to diminish me had revealed just how capable I really was. My restaurant empire had grown to include 3 food trucks, 2 sit-down locations, and a catering company that served corporate events throughout the state. The cooking classes had expanded into a culinary school where I taught other women to start their own food businesses. I'd written a cookbook that became a regional bestseller. None of this would have happened if David hadn't sent that cruel message. His betrayal had forced me to stop playing small, stop dimming my light to make him feel more comfortable. In trying to destroy me, he'd actually set me free. My sister Maria often joked that David had done me the biggest favor of his life by leaving. Think about it, she'd say. You could still be married to someone who didn't appreciate you, supporting his dreams while he dismissed yours. She was right. David's selfishness had been my liberation. The young women who worked in my restaurants often asked about my divorce, inspired by my story of rebuilding after betrayal. The hardest part, I'd tell them, wasn't the divorce itself. It was realizing I'd spent years making myself smaller to accommodate someone who never valued my contributions. I kept David's original text message framed in my office, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of how far I'd traveled. Below it hung a photo from my latest business expansion, surrounded by employees who'd become like family. The contrast told the whole story. 5 years after David's text message, I was featured on the cover of Regional Business magazine as Entrepreneur of the Year. The article focused on my journey from cooking instructor to restaurant owner, highlighting my commitment to hiring and training other women in the food industry. The interviewer asked about my divorce only briefly. That experience taught me the importance of protecting what you build, I explained. Not because you don't trust people, but because you owe it to yourself to be prepared for anything. The article mentioned David only as her former spouse, a footnote in my success story. My nephew's wife, inspired by my business model, had started her own bakery using principles I'd taught her about financial separation and gradual growth. Watching her success reminded me that David's betrayal hadn't just changed my life. It had created ripples that helped other women too. The cooking school I'd opened had trained over 200 students in its first 2 years. Many had gone on to start their own food businesses, creating a network of women entrepreneurs who supported each other's success. Mrs. Patterson, now 80, still taught classes on traditional techniques and life wisdom. During our 5th anniversary celebration, Mrs. Patterson pulled me aside. "You know what I love most about this place?" she asked. "It's not just about food. You've created a space where people learn they're capable of more than they imagined." Her words captured exactly what I'd hoped to build. David's mother Margaret had become one of my most loyal customers and an unofficial ambassador for the restaurant. She brought friends, hosted family dinners, and always spoke proudly of what Linda accomplished. Her support meant more than she knew, representing a bridge between my past and present. The final chapter of my story with David came 6 years after his devastating text. His brother Mike called with news. David had suffered a heart attack and was in the hospital. "He's asking for you," Mike said carefully. "I told him I'd call, but I understand if you don't want to see him." I sat with that request for several hours. Part of me felt obligated by our shared history, 15 years of marriage that had meant something once. But the larger part of me recognized that chapter had closed long ago. David and I were different people now, shaped by the choices we'd made after his betrayal. Instead of visiting, I sent flowers with a simple card. "Wishing you a full recovery. Linda." Mike later told me David had cried when he read it, understanding that my kindness came from a place of peace rather than any desire to reconnect. That gesture felt like the final period at the end of our story. I'd moved from devastation to success, from betrayal to wisdom, from anger to peace. David's cruel text had been intended to break me, but it had actually been the beginning of my truest life. My business empire continued to grow. I'd been approached by investors interested in taking the brand national, but I preferred the personal connection of regional expansion. Each new location allowed me to hire more women, teach more skills, and create more opportunities for independence. The cooking classes had evolved into something magical, part culinary school, part therapy session, part business incubator. Students came to learn recipes but left with confidence, skills, and often friendships that lasted long after graduation. Many had become successful entrepreneurs themselves. 7 years after David's text message, I was invited to speak at the same community center where I'd first read his cruel words. The kitchen where I'd taught dumplings that day now hosted my advanced entrepreneurship classes for women starting food businesses. Looking out at the audience of aspiring entrepreneurs, I shared the truth David had never understood. Success isn't about having someone support your dreams. It's about believing in yourself enough to make them happen, regardless of who else believes in you. A young woman in the front row raised her hand. "What if your family thinks you're being too ambitious?" she asked. I smiled, remembering David's constant complaints about my obsession with work. "Then you're probably on the right track." The question and answer session revealed how many women struggled with the same issues I'd faced: partners who minimized their ambitions, families who prioritized others' comfort over their success, internal voices that whispered they weren't capable of more. The most important lesson I learned, I told them, wasn't about business or money. It was about trusting my own judgment. When someone shows you who they are through their actions, believe them the first time. The nodding heads throughout the audience told me they understood. After the presentation, several women approached with their own stories of betrayal and recovery. Some were still in the devastating early stages, others were years into rebuilding. All of them were stronger than they realized, just as I'd been on that day when David's message arrived. That evening, I walked through my flagship restaurant during the dinner rush. The kitchen hummed with efficient activity. Servers moved gracefully between tables, and customers enjoyed meals prepared with love and skill. This world I'd built was exactly what David had dismissed as my little hobby. My assistant manager, Rosa, had started as a student in my cooking class 5 years earlier. Now she managed a staff of 20 and was saving money to open her own location. "You changed my life," she told me recently. "You showed me I could be more than I thought possible." These success stories weren't about revenge or proving David wrong. They were about discovering what happened when women stopped making themselves small and started believing in their own capabilities. David's betrayal had been the catalyst, but the real power had always been within me. 10 years after that devastating text message, I received an unexpected call from Jessica, the 21-year-old who'd unknowingly helped destroy my marriage. She was now 31, married to someone her own age, and running a successful marketing company. "I wanted to thank you," she said, her voice mature and thoughtful, "for not hating me, for showing grace when you had every right to be angry. Watching how you handled everything taught me what real strength looks like." Pause. David did us both a favor by showing his true character so clearly. Her call reminded me that healing creates space for wisdom. The woman who'd been devastated by David's cruelty had evolved into someone who could extend compassion even to those who'd hurt her. That transformation was worth more than any revenge. Today, as I prepare for the opening of my 10th restaurant location, I sometimes think about that text message that changed everything. "I'm leaving you for my 21-year-old girlfriend and moving to Florida. I've already drained our joint account, haha." Those words were meant to devastate me, to leave me broken and begging. Instead, they became the foundation of everything I built afterward. David thought he was writing the ending to our story. In reality, he was just clearing the way for my real life to begin. My response had been simple. "Good luck." 2 words that contained all the grace and strength he'd never recognized in me. By the time he realized what I'd accomplished, it was indeed too late. Not for reconciliation, but for him to claim any credit for the woman I'd become. The young women who work in my restaurants today see me as a success story, but I know the truth. I'm not successful because I survived David's betrayal. I'm successful because I finally stopped hiding my light to make someone else comfortable. David's cruel text message had been intended to diminish me, to reduce me to nothing so he could feel better about his choices. Instead, it became the moment I discovered my own worth. His attempt to destroy me had actually set me free. Sometimes the cruelest betrayals become our greatest gifts. Not because they don't hurt but because they force us. Thanks for watching Granny's Voice.